The first time I caught Karren Miller from the HOA snooping around my porch, I thought maybe she was just being her usual nosy self. You know the type. Mid-50s, bob haircut stiff with hairspray, clipboard glued to her hand like it was a weapon. I'm Sawyer Johnson, and I moved into Willow Creek Estates 3 years ago, thinking it would be a quiet place to settle down. I didn't realize I was walking into a dictatorship run by Karren and her little band of suburban tyrants. It all started when I ordered some expensive tools for my garage renovation. I got the delivery notifications, but the boxes never showed up. At first, I thought maybe the couriers had messed up, but after the third package went missing, I knew something was up. I installed a security camera hidden inside one of those fake rocks by my front door. Best $50 I ever spent. 2 days later, I caught her. Clear as day. Karren in her floral print blouse and khaki capris, marching right up to my porch, looking both ways like a cartoon villain, and snatching a package under her arm. She even had the nerve to tuck it into one of those ridiculous reusable shopping bags like she was doing me a favor. I almost couldn't believe it. My first thought was to confront her right then and there, but I decided to play it smart. I needed more proof, so I let her keep digging her own grave. Over the next week, 3 more packages went missing, and every time my camera caught her red-handed. I wasn't about to let her weasel her way out of this with some excuse like security concerns or regulation enforcement, which were her go-to lines whenever she wanted to boss people around. No, this time she messed with the wrong guy. I spent the next night combing through the footage, organizing it all with dates and times. Then I contacted each courier company, FedEx, USPS, you name it. I explained what was happening and sent them the videos as proof. Turns out, package theft is taken pretty seriously when you have hard evidence, especially when it's someone impersonating a property authority. The FedEx rep sounded shocked. "You're saying someone from your HOA is stealing your deliveries?" "Yep," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And I've got it all on video." He promised to escalate it to their security team. UPS said the same. Even the local USPS branch got involved. Turns out, tampering with mail is a federal crime. Things were about to get a lot worse for Karren Miller. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see her squirm. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps on my front porch. I peeked through the blinds just in time to see Officer Ramirez and another uniformed deputy knocking firmly on my door. I pulled it open, heart pounding but steady. "You Sawyer Johnson?" Ramirez asked, already pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "That's me," I said. "We got reports from multiple courier services about package theft linked to this address." "They said you had evidence." Without wasting a second, I led them inside and pulled up the footage on my laptop. I could see Ramirez's eyebrows arching higher with every clip. His partner, Officer Tran, leaned in closer, his mouth tightening into a grim line. "She's the HOA president, right?" Ramirez asked. "Unfortunately," I said, clicking through the timestamps. "She's been helping herself to anything that hits my porch." Tran exchanged a glance with Ramirez. "You're aware tampering with mail falls under federal jurisdiction," I nodded. "That's why I made copies of everything, just in case." Ramirez gave a low whistle. "Smart move." He pulled out his radio and spoke in low, clipped words. Within minutes, 2 more squad cars rolled up. I watched from my window as they fanned out through the neighborhood, heading straight toward Karren's house at the corner of Maple and Birch. I wasn't about to miss this. I grabbed a jacket and strolled casually down the sidewalk, pretending to check my phone. A small group of neighbors had already gathered, whispering behind cupped hands. Mrs. Alvarez from 3 doors down caught my eye and mouthed, "What's happening?" I just tilted my head toward the action. Karren answered the door wearing a lemon-yellow cardigan and an expression of forced innocence. She barely had time to say a word before Ramirez presented the warrant. Her face drained of color as they stepped inside. It didn't take long. Within 15 minutes, they carried out 2 large bins overflowing with unopened packages, some addressed to me. others bearing names I recognized from up and down the street. Officer Tran held up a ripped-open envelope and shook his head in disgust. Karren tried to protest, her voice rising in frantic pitches. I was securing them for the residents. It's part of my duties as HOA president. Ramirez didn't even blink. You don't have the legal authority to intercept or store mail, ma'am. That's a federal crime. But I was trying to protect the neighborhood from porch pirates, she stammered. You should be thanking me. Tran's voice was cold as ice. You're under arrest for mail theft, tampering with deliveries, and possession of stolen property. The neighbors gasped. Mr. Patel from across the street fumbled with his phone, recording every second. Karren's hands shook as they cuffed her and walked her down the front steps. The image of her being loaded into the back of the cruiser was something I planned to treasure for a long, long time. After the excitement died down, Ramirez came back over to me, a clipboard in hand. We'll need a formal statement. You're not in trouble, but you're an important witness. No problem, I said, signing where he pointed. As I handed the clipboard back, a heavy-set man in a gray suit stepped out of one of the unmarked cars parked nearby. His badge clipped to his belt said Federal Postal Inspector. He introduced himself as Agent Vickers. I'll be taking over from here, he said, his voice gravelly. Charges like these, they don't just disappear, especially not when they involve tampering with federal property. Glad to hear it, I said. Vickers nodded once and turned toward the cluster of residents still murmuring on the sidewalk. Later that afternoon, a community meeting was hastily called at the clubhouse. The remaining HOA board members looked like they'd aged 10 years overnight. Without Karren running the show, they stumbled through the agenda like lost lambs. Ted from Lot 17, a retired Navy officer with a booming voice, stood up and demanded answers. Who else knew what she was doing? He asked, his voice cutting through the room. The board members exchanged nervous looks. We had no idea, mumbled Denise, the secretary. Ted crossed his arms. You expect us to believe nobody noticed bins of stolen packages piling up? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Another neighbor, Clara from Lot 22, stood up. I found an empty box in the community dumpster last week that wasn't even addressed to her. I thought it was weird. A third neighbor, Mr. Brenner, added, She fined me last month for a supposed excessive mailbox decoration. Now I'm wondering if that was just a cover to snoop around. The room erupted into angry chatter. That's when I stood up. I have video proof of her stealing from me, I said. The police have it now, and if you all check with your couriers, you might find you're missing more than you realized. The board members wilted under the glares of the residents. Ted slammed his hand on the folding table. Effective immediately, I motion that we suspend all HOA leadership activities until a full audit is completed. We appoint an interim committee of volunteers to oversee operations until further notice. A chorus of "second" swept through the room. No one even bothered to vote formally. It was clear the neighborhood was done with Karren's reign of terror. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Agent Vickers led the investigation alongside local authorities. Turns out, Karren's scheme had been running for months. She didn't just steal packages, she sold off valuable items online under a fake account. Jewelry, electronics, tools, you name it. The classified evidence sealed her fate. Federal prosecutors charged her with multiple counts of mail theft and wire fraud. She faced serious prison time, not some slap on the wrist fine. Meanwhile, the interim committee, made up of actual residents who cared about the community, got busy. They rewrote the HOA bylaws to strip the board of unchecked power. No more secret fines. No more unapproved inspections. Every rule change had to be voted on by the entire neighborhood. As for me, I finally finished my garage renovation, tools intact. One evening, as I was organizing the last of my equipment, Ted dropped by with a 6-pack of local craft beer. You did good, Johnson, he said, cracking open a bottle. Real good. I took a long sip, savoring the crisp taste of victory. I just hate bullies, I said. Ted laughed. Then you're gonna love the new Willow Creek Estates. No more dictators in cardigans. Word spread beyond our neighborhood too. A local news crew showed up a week later, wanting interviews. I declined, preferring to let the facts speak for themselves. But Ted, Clara, and a few others gave statements, making it clear that this community stood up when it mattered most. And Karren, last I heard, she was facing a minimum of 5 years in federal prison. Her house went up for sale not long after, the for sale sign swinging in the breeze like a white flag of surrender. There's something sweet about real justice, not the petty, power-tripping kind Karren loved to wield, but the kind that comes from standing your ground, gathering your evidence, and letting the truth do what it does best, expose the guilty, and free the rest of us. A week after the community meeting, I got a certified letter from the county courthouse summoning me as a primary witness in Karren's preliminary hearing. I half expected this, but seeing it on official stationery still gave me a strange sense of finality. This wasn't just neighborhood gossip anymore. It was real, and it was happening. The courthouse was an imposing stone building downtown with polished marble floors and cold fluorescent lighting. I sat outside the courtroom on a stiff wooden bench, my thumb running along the edge of the witness statement I had prepared. Across the hall, I spotted Agent Vickers speaking with the district attorney assigned to the case, a sharp-eyed woman named Claudia Reyes. When she noticed me, Reyes walked over, heels clicking sharply on the tile. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming today," she said without any excess pleasantries. "Your testimony, along with the video evidence you've provided, is pivotal. Without it, the defense would argue this was a misunderstanding." "Not much to misunderstand when she's caught red-handed," I said, keeping my voice low. Reyes gave a satisfied nod. "Exactly. We're pushing for the maximum sentence. It's important we show the court that this wasn't some isolated lapse in judgment. This was systematic theft, and she abused her position of authority to do it." Before I could respond, the bailiff called us in. I followed Reyes into the courtroom, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind me. Karren sat at the defense table, her hair flatter than usual, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. She avoided my gaze completely, focusing instead on a crumpled tissue in her hands. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair, called the room to order. After a few procedural motions, Reyes called me to the stand. I walked to the witness box, my boots echoing on the floor. After swearing in, Reyes began her questioning. It was all straightforward: how I discovered the theft, the steps I took to document it, and how the authorities got involved. I kept my answers crisp and factual, letting the evidence speak for itself. When Reyes finished, Karren's defense attorney, a wiry man with a hawkish nose, rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Johnson," he said, adjusting his glasses, "isn't it true that my client believed she was protecting the packages from potential theft?" "No," I said plainly. "If that were the case, she would have notified the homeowners or left a notice. Instead, she hid the packages in her home without permission." He tried to trip me up with a few more questions, but the videos made it impossible to spin a different story. After 10 minutes of floundering, he gave up and sat down. As I stepped down, I caught a glimpse of the jury. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to outright anger. It was clear they weren't buying the misunderstood savior act the defense was selling. The hearing continued with testimony from the Couriers. Each one confirmed that no HOA in the area had any legal authority to intercept deliveries. The USP's inspector detailed how tampering with mail was a federal offense, carrying serious penalties. By the time the prosecution rested, the damage was done. The judge ruled that there was overwhelming evidence to proceed to a full trial. Karren's bail was denied, given the risk that she would tamper with more evidence or try to intimidate witnesses. When the bailiff led her out in handcuffs, she didn't even resist, just shuffled along like she was already halfway to prison. Outside the courthouse, a few local reporters had gathered, microphones ready. I kept walking, not interested in becoming a public figure. Let the facts tell the story. Back in Willow Creek Estates, things were changing fast. The interim committee, now calling themselves the Willow Creek Neighborhood Association, held their first open forum to discuss long overdue reforms. I wasn't planning to run for anything. I preferred my peace and quiet, but I showed up to support the effort. Ted stood at the front of the room, a clipboard in hand. "First order of business," he said, voice carrying easily through the assembly hall. "We're proposing a full external audit of the HOA's finances for the last 5 years." Murmurs of approval swept through the crowd. "And," Clara added, stepping up beside him, "we're proposing term limits for all committee members. No more lifetime rulers." The proposals passed unanimously. Then came the discussion about the surveillance equipment Karren had installed around the neighborhood without consent. Turns out, she'd used HOA funds to purchase a network of small cameras hidden in streetlights and common areas supposedly for security, but without any oversight or transparency. A local attorney, Mr. Dalton, stood up from the back row. "Unauthorized surveillance on private property violates state privacy laws," he said. "Once the audit is complete, I recommend filing a civil suit to recover misused funds and damages." Ted nodded. "We'll put it to a vote after the audit, no shortcuts." The energy in the room was electric. For the first time since moving here, I felt like the neighborhood was truly ours, not some twisted fiefdom. Meanwhile, back at my place, I decided to upgrade my security system permanently. The fake rock camera had served its purpose, but it was time for something a little more serious. I installed a full perimeter system with motion sensors, night vision, and cloud backup. Not because I expected trouble, but because I knew better than to assume peace would last forever. A few days later, an unmarked envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a letter from the Department of Justice, informing me that Karren had agreed to a plea deal. She pled guilty to multiple counts of mail theft and wire fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence, 7 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay restitution to all affected residents, totaling nearly $80,000. Given that her house was already foreclosed and her accounts frozen, it was unlikely we'd see much of that money. But the principle mattered. The court-appointed trustee began selling off her assets. The proceeds would be divided among the residents named in the case. I didn't care much about the payout. Knowing she was being held accountable was satisfaction enough. One evening, Ted and a few other neighbors set up a barbecue in the park to celebrate the reforms. I wandered over, plate in hand, and joined a circle of lawn chairs around the fire pit. "Feels good to win one," Clara said, passing me a soda. "Feels better to know she can't hurt anyone else," I replied, tipping my chair back. "Never thought I'd see the day," muttered Mr. Patel, shaking his head. "For a while there, I thought we'd just have to live under her thumb forever. People like her only win if no one stands up," I said. "All it takes is one person willing to push back." Ted raised his bottle. "To pushing back." We all clinked our drinks together, the firelight reflecting in our eyes. As I sat there, listening to laughter and the low hum of conversation, I realized something important. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about reclaiming what they tried to steal: our trust, our peace, our right to live without fear. And in Willow Creek Estates, we had taken it all back. The barbecue stretched late into the evening, neighbors lingering around the fire pit as the stars blinked to life above Willow Creek Estates. I stayed until the embers burned low, then headed home, the quiet streets feeling lighter somehow, as if the whole neighborhood had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The next morning, a thick manila envelope landed on my doorstep. It was from the interim committee, now officially called the Willow Creek Neighborhood Association. Inside was an itemized report from the independent audit they had commissioned, and what it revealed made the original package thefts look like petty mischief. For years, Karren and her loyalists had been embezzling HOA funds. The audit discovered tens of thousands of dollars siphoned into personal accounts under the guise of made-up maintenance projects, fake landscaping costs, and falsified security upgrades. Worse, some of the so-called vendors were nothing more than shell companies registered under names suspiciously close to Karren's maiden name. I flipped through the pages, every fraudulent transaction documented in stark black and white. It wasn't just theft from individuals anymore, it was systemic financial fraud against the entire community. And unlike the stolen packages, this wasn't just a neighborhood issue. This was a full-blown criminal case. By noon, Ted, Clara, and a handful of others had gathered at the clubhouse, documents spread across the long conference table. They looked grim. "We need to report this immediately," Ted said, thumbing through the audit. "No delays, no cover-ups." Clara tapped a finger on a particular line item. "Look at this." She paid herself a consulting fee for the Neighborhood Watch program, $2,500. There is no watch program. Mr. Dalton, the attorney who had volunteered his services after the fiasco, nodded. "We're looking at felony embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possible racketeering if multiple people were involved." I leaned over the table. "We can't just hand this to the local precinct. This needs to go to the county's Financial Crimes Division." Dalton agreed. "And the district attorney's office. We'll need a formal complaint and copies of everything." Within the hour, we had organized the paperwork, made multiple copies, and secured everything in locked briefcases. Dalton drove straight to the county courthouse while we followed in separate cars, the weight of what we were doing settling in. At the DA's office, we met with a senior prosecutor named Leonard Pierce. He was a tall man with a deep voice and a reputation for being relentless when it came to public corruption cases. After reviewing the evidence, he sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This is bigger than you think," he said. "If the shell companies were used to launder the stolen funds, this could cross into federal jurisdiction. We'll coordinate with the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Unit." Hearing the word FBI sent a ripple of disbelief through the group, but no one backed down. We gave formal statements, turned over all the documents, and left the courthouse knowing the wheels of justice were grinding forward once again, only this time it was going to be even more serious. Over the next few weeks, the investigation picked up steam. Federal agents visited Willow Creek Estates, quietly interviewing residents and subpoenaing bank records. One morning, 3 black SUVs rolled through the gates, and agents in dark suits entered Karren's now vacant house with a warrant. They emerged hours later carrying boxes of files, electronics, and what looked like ledger books. The news broke that evening. Local channels ran the story under bold headlines. "Former HOA president under federal investigation for embezzlement and fraud." Karren's mugshot, taken after her initial arrest for the package thefts, flashed across the screen. She looked gaunt, her carefully maintained appearance crumbling under the public scrutiny. The fallout spread quickly. 2 former board members, Denise and Carl, were subpoenaed and later indicted for aiding and abetting the scheme. They had signed off on fake invoices and approved fraudulent expenses in exchange for kickbacks. The community was stunned and furious. At the next neighborhood meeting, the mood was electric with anger and determination. Ted stood at the front, holding a copy of the news article. "They betrayed every single one of us," he said. "But we're not just going to clean up the mess, we're going to rebuild this place the right way." New committees formed that night, one for finance oversight, another for community development, and a third for legal reform. Every position was elected by open vote, and every decision had to be made with full transparency. Meanwhile, the legal case against Karren and her cronies moved forward like a freight train. Pierce built a devastating case, showing a pattern of deception stretching back nearly 8 years. Bank records revealed how Karren funneled HOA dues into personal vacations, luxury handbags, and even a down payment on a lakeside cabin 2 towns over. The feds found hidden ledgers detailing every fraudulent transaction, complete with coded notes that Karren had foolishly thought would protect her. At the federal courthouse, the trial lasted 3 weeks. I was called to testify again, this time alongside other residents who had suffered under Karren's rule. Each testimony painted a picture of a woman who had wielded her authority like a weapon, using fear, manipulation, and outright theft to enrich herself. The defense tried to argue that Karren had suffered from administrative confusion and poor bookkeeping, but the jury didn't buy it. Not after seeing the vacation photos from her hidden social media accounts, photos paid for with our stolen money. The verdict came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern former prosecutor known for handing down harsh sentences in corruption cases, didn't hold back. Karren was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for at least 12. Denise and Carl received 5 and 7 years respectively, with hefty restitution orders attached. As part of the sentencing, the court ordered the seizure of Karren's remaining assets. The lakeside cabin, her SUV, and even the contents of her personal bank accounts were liquidated to repay the stolen HOA funds. Every resident received a reimbursement check, not enough to erase the betrayal, but enough to feel like a tangible victory. At the final community meeting of the year, Ted stood before a packed clubhouse, holding up a framed copy of the new Willow Creek Neighborhood Association charter. "This," he said, "is what happens when good people don't look the other way." Applause thundered through the room. Afterward, as I stood on the clubhouse patio overlooking the now vibrant and well-kept neighborhood, Clara joined me, a paper plate of brownies balanced in one hand. "Never thought I'd see the day," she said, tearing a brownie in half. "We actually took it back." I nodded, watching kids ride their bikes down the street without a care in the world. We didn't just take it back, we made it better. Behind us, laughter and music floated out from the clubhouse, a sharp contrast to the tension that had ruled the neighborhood for too long. The garden beds were full of new flowers, the sidewalks were clean, and best of all, there wasn't a single clipboard-wielding tyrant in sight. As the sun dipped below the trees, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, I realized something important. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about restoring trust, rebuilding community, and making sure that no one ever forgot how close we had come to losing it all in Willow Creek Estates. We remembered, and we would never let it happen again.